are larger than they were, dear Tom. The stream appears less wide, but kneeling down beside the stream, dear Tom, I started so to see how sadly I am changed since 15 years ago. But when our time shall come, dear Tom, and we are called to go, I hope they'll let us where we played just 15 years ago. Just 15 years ago.
Check into cash. Need help paying for life's little emergencies? Get the cash you need today from your friends at Check into Cash.
Get a payday advance today for up to $425. At Check into Cash, we make it quick, easy, and confidential.
Get the cash you need now at Check into Cash. Visit checkintocash.com for the store near you.
Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Where the old town goes, they moved it on over here in the shopping mall. Where the old town goes, did my hometown get old, or just me? Did all my friends get old, or just me? Are they all gonna have to be told, or just me?
Good morning. Welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. Good morning, Debbie Moore. Tell me what's going on.
Good morning, Ron. Today is November the 21st, and we have some friends in here from Cleveland's Historic District, and we're going to be talking about some of the historic buildings and homes and all of that this morning. We hope everybody will choose to stay with us.
Okay, anything going on in the community?
No. Not that I'm aware
A
of.
couple people this past
Some mornings we have lists of things that we want to announce.
Paul Awesome and Keith Beatty, two good friends of our community, passed away this week. And
Absolutely.
At the top of the hour at 11 o'clock, we always play a song called Gone Home. It's a song dedicated to all those people in our community and the people of Paris that have gone on, and we'll play that song in their honor.
World's been a crazy place this
And
week.
so tell me who you got here with you.
We have Amy Banks and Rufus Triplett with us, and we're going to be talking about their homes and some of the other homes down in the area. Rufus, can you kind of give us some outline of where the historic district is actually located?
Roughly from the monument north to 20th Street, from Ocoee over to Harle Avenue.
Okay. So we haven't gotten a whole lot south of there yet.
No, we haven't at this time.
Because there's some really historic homes and buildings up in that area,
Right.
too.
Now, the city has designated some houses, such as ours and the Thompsons next door to us, as being in the historic district, but it's not in the National Register district.
I see. So the city can kind of designate that, too, because actually from the library south down to the new building for Lee University, all of those houses are very old for Cleveland.
They are. They range from the 1850s to the 1900s, early 1900s.
And I would think the oldest house in that area, or the oldest building, it's not a house in that area, of course, would be the white building there just south of the monument, which was the old Masonic Hall and the girls' school. That was 1848, something like that.
Something in
Yeah.
that neighborhood.
Yeah, it's currently an apartment building.
Right.
And I noticed the last few days they've been cleaning up a little bit around that and the house next door, and so I'm hoping that they're going to do some restorations.
That would be great. That particular building, it would be a shame to lose it.
Absolutely, because indeed I think it has to be, if not the oldest brick building inside the city limits of Cleveland, it'd have to be awful close.
It would. Amy, do you know how many houses are in that? I mean, is there a count?
What's a-
Well, you know,
Get a little closer to the mic.
some people, to sort of differentiate a little bit, we have the Historic Neighborhood Association boundaries, and within that boundary falls the Historic District. Our neighborhood is more inclusive, and the Historic District that's designated by the state is a little more exclusive. They had certain standards, certain criteria that they had to follow. So our neighborhood probably has they looked at around 660 houses
600.
when
oh.
they were looking
Wow.
at this. Yeah.
Wow.
In about 2002, Dr. George Bowen, who was a UT planner, UT professor, came in at the request of some neighborhood people getting together trying to work on this, got some ideas together to get him to come down and kind of help us learn how to preserve our neighborhood. And so he taught us and guided us to be more inclusive. So we go over to 25th Street, to Central Avenue, to Parker, and down to Keith. And within our district sits the Historic District. And a lot of people have some confusion about that.
I do.
about those
I mean, I
boundaries.
didn't realize
Mhm,
that.
Right. And a lot of people think that our neighborhood association is the historic commissions under their direction. And, you know, we fall within it, but we're more than that. We're larger than that.
Well, we really appreciate what you guys are doing. We've lost so many homes and buildings, not only to age and time and disrepair, but the tornadoes a couple of years ago certainly did not help the situation. That we lost some, or got some things damaged so much. I know out in the county that had to be taken down. That was definitely over 100 years old.
Yeah.
Well, Amy,
Big
tell us
house
which.
trees.
Say a little closer there, Amy. You're not a big talker like Rufus.
Rufus got that big
I
booming
set
voice.
his mic down too. Tell us which house is yours now. So
Well, we live at the corner of Ocoee and Centenary Avenue in the old, what actually was originally called the Cate House. And then the Steed family, they were well known for the people that came in and did the house. But when Lee University does their historic tour in the spring, we were fortunate to be asked, and of course Rufus has done this too, and they came in and did some extensive research on our house, and they called it the Cate House. But the Steeds were well known, and they I thought built the house. I think the Cate, it dated back, we lost a courthouse, so we don't have a lot of basic information, because our house was, they think, built in around 1860. But the Steeds were the ones that were known.
I had always thought that was a Thomas Callaway house. I know Rufus's house. Didn't Thomas Callaway build your house?
He did.
But what I think and what's the truth may be two different things.
Right, yes.
Well, and there's a bit of controversy as to whether the Callaway family actually lived in it or not.
I
but-
don't think. I don't know Rufus, but I think of Thomas Callaway as just being a builder.
but
because
a number of
He built the house out at Wildwood Avenue.
Roth House.
He built the Roth House. He built so many houses his family could not possibly have lived in them. So I think he was kind of a spectator of sorts, and
Right. I agree with you that he speculated in property, and he sold it to his friend C.L. Hardwick.
Okay.
And so it stayed in the Hardwick family from 1852 until 1947. And my wife is a Hardwick descendant, and we bought it back in 2012.
And I cheered that it got back in that family. I really did, because I think that that's very important. Now, what's that? Wait just a second, Ron. What's that side street beside your house?
It is 6th Street.
Okay, so 6th Street at Ocoee Street, and most of you will recognize it as the house that was refurbished in what year?
2012.
Yeah. This is the house that we laugh about. Sometimes I went driving up through there one day, and there was all the construction stuff. And here I am, my little Volkswagen, right up on the sidewalk and parked and get out. And the guys looked like, uh-oh, here comes trouble. And I went over and I explained to them what the stepping stone was.
Right.
And said, please protect it. And they looked at me and they said, we will. And
I remember the conversation that we had. You said, you're not going to do anything with that stepping stone.
No. And I happened to run into you at the library then, and then I knew it was in good hands when it was back in the Hardwick family.
Amy, tell people visually what your house looks like. I mean, you said at the corner of Centenary, but what is
Right.
it?
Our house faces Ocoee Street.
The big
but
white house.
Yes.
The driveway comes off of Centenary, and we have the cedars that come down to the front, which are recognized as historic trees by the Cleveland Shade Tree Board. There's a marker there. So it was the old carriage lane, and we have the carriage stone that was there at the end of the as you approach the house.
It's a big white 2-story house, right?
Yes, it's the white
Just
2-story house.
Everybody who's saying, well, it's Centenary in there, but if you're standing across at Lee University looking over, you'd see it.
We're the cedar line trees,
Right.
that house that has the.
How old do
path
you
down
think
the
those
front.
cedar trees are?
Oh, well, they think that they were 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that, years ago, people planted the cedars because they felt like they warded off yellow fever. And if you go down into Mississippi, you'll see a lot of old
Yes,
homes
you do
with the
see that.
cedar trees
Right.
out front. And they felt like it had some protection factor.
Well, I think some too is that, it's a sign of everlasting life, and they don't drop leaves everywhere,
Yeah,
but
we have to
and they're
keep
sturdy, and they last a long,
Right,
obviously
right.
a long
You see them in
time.
graveyards a lot.
Have you
but-
lost any trees since you lived there?
Knock on wood.
Knock on
we have
wood.
not every time a tornado comes through. Of course, I'm a huge tree hugger, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes to a fault to my neighbors. And so I'm always if a big wind gust comes down, I'm like, we're protected,
Mm-hmm.
and we love trees. So we've been fortunate. And we have the ginkgo tree out front, which is historically significant as well. There's one that's similar up at the library, and they were thought that somebody brought the seeds in, over 100 years ago, and probably planted them somewhere around the same time. So it's a pretty fabulous tree. People line up usually
Yellow
Thanksgiving
leaves.
weekend.
Yeah.
The wonderful ginkgo tree, and it drops its leaves usually in about 24 hours. It just suddenly will drop its leaves like velvet underneath. But if we have a good fall, and I don't know what will happen this year, but Thanksgiving weekend, the tree is beautiful, and people line up to get their pictures made out there. And people have professional pictures done. You'll see the photographers come out.
Wonderful.
So that's fun to have the
We'll have to take.
special yard.
Now, there's
The
another
grandbabies.
big ginkgo tree on the south side of Gray Epperson's.
There's
property on-
We kind of
on
feel
the
like
6th
those
Street
were,
side,
and they were
you know.
planted probably somewhere in the same time frame. Yep.
Very
Now-
interesting. Now, Gray's house is the one that's beside you on 6th Street.
It's across 6th Street
Yeah.
from us.
Now, who lived there before Gray? Starts with an
Reimers,
H.
S.B. Reimer.
Oh,
Granny
S.B.
Reimer. We call her Granny
Granny
Reimer.
Reimer.
Granny Reimer.
She was 106, was she, when she died?
She was.
Good line. I want to paint a picture for the people who are listening, saying that where Amy's house was the country.
Yeah.
There
Absolutely.
wasn't Lee University. There wasn't as many houses down there. So that was probably bigger, maybe not a plantation, but a
So
bigger
your house was
farm
actually
area, right?
there
Right,
before
yeah.
Centenary College.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
It was considered one of the first houses, and some people say could have been one of the oldest houses in the whole area. But yeah, and Alan and I talked this morning about the Potts Farm, but like half of our side yard of our house probably was originally part of the Potts Farm a long time ago. But as far as the original farm, I'm not sure.
Have you seen an agricultural report on your house?
No, but I bet you could help me with that.
I bet you I could find that for you, Amy.
That'd
That
be
would be
interesting.
really exciting because what it would do is it would tell you how many acres were actually being cultivated
Yeah.
and what the year's crop was and how many sheep were born and all that. And I'm sure it was a striving farm, which included all of Centenary Avenue.
Well, family lore says that our house was in the country when it was.
Oh, of course it was.
Yes.
And you have to
What
kind of
about
think,
that?
where Amy was talking about the trees and the yellow fever. Well, then not everyone, a lot of people thought if they had their own cow and they milked their own cow, then you wouldn't get all of those diseases. So I don't care how fancy smancy your house was. Everybody had a barn up through there too, and
Yeah.
a striving farm.
Right.
Now, where do you think the water came from for your house originally? Is there a
Well,
spring there?
There's a lot of underground water, and of course, it all rolls down and comes out down at Deer Park. You see
Okay.
the creek. It's we have a lot of underground water that goes
Yeah.
through there.
Now, Rufus, where does the water from Deer Park come from? Is it coming from the Phillar Lake?
No,
No?
it's coming from up in the area around Lee or up the hill toward the monument.
Probably Big
and
Springs out there.
flows through.
Yeah, well, there's so much underground water everywhere, Deb.
Well, I know. I'm just trying to figure out what spring it was because I probably might know what Indian used to live there. I'm a fountain of useless information, Amy.
Well-
Alan would probably tell you it was Taylor Spring.
Oh, yeah.
No, that flows a different.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway.
Well, I know our houses originally had a detached kitchen because we had
Oh, yeah.
a historical architect come down to look at it when we first started renovating, and there was evidence of a detached kitchen.
Which would have been appropriate for the times. Now, I believe that when I came on the tour that you told me that there might be some damage from the Civil War in your house.
What'd you call that folklore? What did you refer to that home
Family lore.
family lore?
Well, we'll take family lore because
Family
every
lore.
now and then you can prove it.
Yeah. Supposedly there's some musket balls in the walls, the exterior walls, and that was why it was originally stuccoed over. No, we don't have exact evidence of that. But
Well,
that's
we
been
think
discussed.
that's the truth that the church there across from your house, what is
First
it?
Presbyterian.
First Presbyterian, that I know that the ladies from the United Daughters of the Confederacy gave me a national award for the book I wrote. And we went there, and when we got our picture made, you could see those holes in the brick. I thought that was really neat.
Now, there's some story about the basement caving in with that church. Have y'all heard that story?
That's the one at what street's the old jail on? First Street.
Okay, so it's not
And
the
Church Street.
Church
Oh, the
across from.
Cumberland Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
In
I thought it was-
1950s,
Okay.
they started renovating the old building, and they were having some meeting there, and the floor caved in, and at least I believe one person was actually killed there. But
Okay.
that was
I
it.
thought that was
Now the windows and the door and a great deal of other materials out of that church is in a house that was built over on Durkee Road, close to Whirlpool, and it was damaged by the tornado, and I think it is probably going to be demolished. But a lot of the materials from that old church building is in that church, in that house.
He just comes up.
Ron says anytime I say, well, I really don't know anything about
Is
that, he just leans
behind
back.
Dairy property out there on Durkee, or
When you turn between Sonic and Calfee's, it's the first house out there on the left that kind of looks like it's been built out of a barn, maybe.
There used to be a
But
barn.
the little side lights in the door, that's the entire length of the door, came out of the old parsonage or something from that church.
interesting.
And I'm just afraid we're going to lose it.
Yeah,
that
hopefully that'll be
house looks
salvaged.
like it's made out of brick, but it's actually wood that has been carved to look like bricks. Another strange thing that they did.
Yeah.
You guys got these older houses, and everybody says, "Oh, those are beautiful," but there's some
Issues.
issues when you have older houses. Sometimes, the electrical.
Really,
What
right?
they didn't put in very good electricals in the 1800s.
Like none.
The indoor toilets weren't there, and they weren't air conditioning, and the roofs, are getting older and stuff. And so, tell us about some of the
Issues.
inherited problems that you get. Deb says you just adopt an old house; you don't really
Yeah.
ever own it. I don't think.
Well, it's interesting. Of course, a lot of our house still has the original old handmade nails,
Mm-hmm.
and the bricks were made on site.
Right.
They set up a kiln and fired the bricks there. And there really isn't a foundation like we think of a foundation in a
Exactly.
modern house. They dug down and just started laying brick.
Same thing with us.
In our basement, the brick walls are solid, 2 feet thick, and then they narrow to support the load all the way up to the rafters. So all of our internal walls are brick as well as the external walls.
I went into a home down in the Red Hill Valley, and when I got up in the attic, there was like a slate roof that they had, put a new roof over. Do you have anything like that? What kind of roofing was on yours? But you had a fire at your house.
There was a fire in the 1920s, and so the bottom floor burned out again. Family lore, the silver all melted. The fire was so hot.
Oh, the silver melted.
But
I hate when that happens.
But the china, because it had already been fired, survived. But at that time, they did an extensive remodeling on the first floor and put in the wide plank floors you see today, and did an addition on the northeast side of the house with a flat roof, so that there was some substantial changes made at that time. The original staircase burned up with the fire, so they put in the staircase that you see today at that time.
Yeah.
So
And now I'm sorry, Rufus. I remember coming through your house too, when you were so generous and opened it up to the public, and they were talking about the floors upstairs, the wood from the floors upstairs. Was that reused wood, or I
It
can't?
was reused wood. Most of the wood upstairs is original, the heart of pine, and we had it laid in a herringbone
Yes, you did.
pattern in the hallway. But 2 of the bedrooms up there had the original heart of pine floors. We pulled up, there were different layers of flooring on top of them. And when we took it up there, they were. So we just sanded those and refinished those to get it back to the original state.
Well, I was so excited. I was concerned when the work started to begin with, because I'm always concerned about what someone's doing to something historic, and I was so pleased with the results.
Well, they were
I thought
good
that you
stewards of
guys
the
did an
house.
outstanding job of making it livable and then preserving what you could.
Everybody wants to update the kitchens and the bathroom, and I think we've done all that tastefully. And
Yeah.
but we do have the original cabinets in our house. We had to add cabinets and make it workable, but we have original cabinets in our house that you can tell when you look at it. It's got the old glass, and across the front of our house is all original old glass. But one interesting point, we of course added on to our house as well, and in the back, our den, which we kind of added on the part of the house that we really live in, the flooring is old pine, heart pine, that was taken from Cooper's bookstore.
Oh,
The
I love
upstairs
it.
of Cooper's, because
Oh.
Richard owned, my husband and I owned it at the time, and bought that, and they literally, because Richard pretty much did a lot of the work himself, and they planed those floors and put it
Beautiful.
down.
Beautiful.
So that's
now,
our den.
your walls are stucco. What's underneath the stucco?
The old brick, and just like Rufus was saying, they had a brick making machine, and they made that all on, right there on site, along with the woodwork. We have a certain pattern of woodwork that frames out all the doorways that we've actually repeated at our river house. It's been kind of interesting. But that was done all that, right there on site. But yeah, the brick, the good old porous brick.
Yes, and that's why the Jackson house is white today, is that it was seeping, and
Yeah, the brick's
they had
porous
to
and
they had to
stuff.
dig down, and then they sealed it the best that they could, and then it got painted
Which
white.
house are you talking about,
The
Debbie?
Jackson house out at Jackson
Yeah.
Lake.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The Reader House originally?
The Reader house originally. It's pre-Civil War, I'm sure,
Yeah.
because there's Civil War stories about it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But you guys have to remember that at the time of the Civil War, there were people. I mean, there were soldiers camped out in your front yard.
Good point.
Oh,
yeah.
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 And I think that was one of the most interesting things when all the fifth graders came to the library and they were doing the reenactments there on that nice green lawn that used to be a beautiful old house. The fifth graders were just amazed that people were camping out there. And I mean, it's well documented.
Right. C.L. Hardy married Isabella Minerva Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is told, again, family lore, that some Union soldiers were coming across the street to get some chickens from the barn out back, and she got a bayonet and chased him out of the yard. with
She
the
was quite
bayonet.
something, wasn't she?
She was.
I love to listen to her stories, and her first husband was shot over a dispute of luggage because he ran the coach line, and she heard that, and she rode a horse all the way from the Tucker Springs area into Cleveland to check on the situation of her husband, and I believe she was like 7 months pregnant and was riding a horse, and she was something else.
You're listening to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. We got Rufus Triplett and Amy Banks here, and we're talking about the historical district in downtown Cleveland. We're going to open up the phones now. You can call us here at 614-5553. If you're out of town, just add 423-614-5553. I practice that so I'll be able to say all that.
You know, I'm thinking, Rufus, that Hardwick Stove Company was started in your backyard.
Well, I don't know if it was exactly in the backyard, but certainly
On the
I
barn.
like to think of the house as having been an incubator. CL had the foresight.
Now, this is the old CL.
This is the original CL.
The original.
Who was born at the Indian Agency up in Charleston.
Yes.
His father, John Wesley Hardwick, was a sub-agent, and his grandfather, Hugh Montgomery, was the last agent to the Cherokee
Absolutely.
before the removal. But he was determined that all of his children would have an education and that he would see that all of his children would be set up in business,
Including the girls,
including the girls.
which was
Good for him.
really forward thinking at that time.
Yeah.
But Stove Company, there was the Woolen Mill, Hardwick Bank and Trust down in Dalton. There was a Hardwick Bank in Somerville, Georgia. The soap company that was
Oh, I know.
started. You know, it
Let's
was
get
just
this
very
call, Rufus.
entrepreneurial.
We'll come back to him. We could do a 4-hour show on him.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ronnie. Dale, how's it going?
Hey, Bullet, how
Bullet.
are you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling a little better each day. I was a little weak there for a while, but I'm getting back my strength.
Well, good.
I want to ask you, I was over the other day talking to where Magic Chef used to be. I was asking them guards if they let me go through there, and they said I couldn't. But do you think they should tear that down, or they should make something in its place? I don't think they should tear it down, do you?
What? Oh, the old foundry there.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, Bullet, it's going to depend on whether somebody comes in and does something useful with it.
A lot of flooding problems in the area.
I was wanting to go through it, and they said they're something they wouldn't let me. But anyway, I said I wish I could go to bring back some memories to me. But and I don't know the way he talked, they're gonna tear it down. I don't know.
I haven't heard, but
Yeah, they're doing studies on that, as I understand it, and they just really haven't come up with any final recommendation as of what to do.
no.
Yeah, it's been there a long time. I know my dad went to work there when he got out of World War II, and used to be Dixie Foundry and Magic Chef. And I worked there 10 years, and but I just wish they could do something without tearing it down. But
Yeah.
anyway, Ron, Dave, I was on your show last week, and I had a good time on there.
Well, we enjoyed having you here, Bullet, and we're glad you're doing better.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye. Bullet mentioning World War II reminds me that my dad came back from World War II and went to work for Hargis Lumber Company. And he and a man named Raymond Ruth were hired by a lot of people up and down Ocoee Street to replace that one missing piece of mantle, or to replace the doors. Or he did the little diamond-shaped windows that you see in some of the houses. My dad did that with a handsaw. And I wish I had been smart enough to have listened, but that's all I remember of that story. But him talking about how he'd go into those old houses and they would duplicate parts that were missing.
Do you have water problems now in your basements?
We do. It's interesting. One of the changes that was made after the fire, they concreted the basement, and they put a drain in each of the rooms down there. And so all the water that seeps in through that brick, and it does, gets in that system and goes into the sump pump and pump it out. So we don't have an issue, but we've got a lot of friends up and down the street because of the high water table. They really have issues every time we have a heavy rain.
There's some downtown buildings, office buildings that have dirt basement floors.
Right.
still. And so, do you have problems?
We have sump pumps, and we have a system that, if something wasn't working, an alarm would go off, and we would know, to go check it. But it's just systems put in place, and basically sump pumps.
Right.
So we just kind of have a cellar. Ours is like an old cellar, and it had a dirt floor, and we poured a concrete pad down there. Yeah, we had a dirt floor. So, but one interesting story about our house, talking about just old stories, when we were first working on it, the people that we bought it from, the daughters, this was Dick Jones' daughter, Candy Jones. I think she lived in Atlanta at the time, but she talked about how her dad, they were having the house painted, and they had the painter had been out on the front on that widow's walk right there and had apparently unbolted the wrought iron right there, and he went out not knowing that and fell over and fell and broke his back and spent the rest of his 7 years in bed upstairs. And so we're like, well, that's a story. Okay, we always be cautious about the widow's walk. But then I think I was eating at Diamond Lil's, and Frances Fillhour, this is how long ago it was, she was in there, and she said, oh, I hear that you bought the house up here, Dick Jones. And so she said, I broke my arm in the front yard up there. And I thought, okay, now I'm getting a little nervous. I'm going to be really cautious. So we were afraid we were going to hear one more story about somebody breaking something. So there's lots of old stories and things that have gone on.
Tell people what a widow walk is for the who don't know.
Well, it's really just a little tiny balcony off the front of the house. And we've since actually replaced that. It was wrought iron at the time.
Right.
And we brought it back to wood, which it originally was. It's just sort of a place you can step out. You can open your doors. I don't know if there's another term or another more accurate way to describe
I know
it.
during near the oceans, that was the
That's
life
the
would
ones
walk
up on
out there.
top of the house.
I guess there was a reason
Yeah,
for it. If
for-
it's a widow's walk, did they walk out to?
I really think the reason around here is that we live in the South and it's extremely hot.
Right.
And
but
you
why
could
it's widow's
open that
walk?
door at night and let
right.
air through, and that would help a lot. And some of them are a little larger than yours, and people actually. Do you have a sleeping porch at your house?
Right, we
How
did.
about
And of
that?
course, we had sleeping porches, a couple of sleeping porches across the back, and just a place where people could leave their bedroom and literally go where the air would flow with the screen. But when we added on, that's now my bathroom and dressing area, and so we covered that up. Yeah, we had sleeping porches, so that was necessary. And our roof, the ceilings in the house are 14 feet tall upstairs. We actually lowered them just a little bit, but the airflow up there is amazing. We can open doors, and we have the big widescreen doors, and you can let that flow through. So a lot of times I may not have the air conditioning
You
on.
guys may know what they're called. I just know that some of the old houses here have an air system that's just kind of like a vent that runs from the upstairs, and they run up and down, and air will come in and out. It kind of, my dad knew how to open which window open and stuff to get a draft going through the house, and that would help. But I don't know. I know that there are down on Harl Avenue. Someone was
Right, yeah.
showing me. I believe Rick Starnes was showing me down at Starnes Flowers.
Where Susie Starnes' law office is now,
Yes.
they have that system in there.
He was kind of explaining it to me, and I had never heard that before. Now, we also, I wish someone had kept better records, because the way the chimneys are designed, there were only a few people that were doing really good brickwork at that time, and some of the chimneys are fluted and some of them are straight, and I don't know which. I can tell that they go with this party or that party, but I don't know who the parties were. I know that one black gentleman, I believe his last name was Parks, was quite the mason.
He was considered the top mason. I don't know. I know ours fell in one time when the lady knocked on the front door selling encyclopedias. And right as she knocked on the door, there was this loud boom in the dining room and just orangey dust just everywhere. So our whole interior fell in. So we had to have that fixed. But
Yeah.
that was a little. So I don't know if he did the work at our house, but it eventually gave way.
It does, because of the mortar gets old, I'm sure. And I know that I was down looking at a house in the Red Hill Valley, and each brick had a thumbprint in it.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that they probably had some kind of community kill that they fired them in, and you had to mark your bricks to get your good bricks back out. So, they'll have a thumbprint in them, or a certain, kind of like the old pottery, will have a certain scratch mark that they knew which piece was theirs. But
Interesting.
we don't know who he was.
Okay. Now, what's some of the you know, you said there's 640 houses and they range from all ranges. What's some of the older houses in the area that comes to your mind real off the top of
our
your head?
houses, I suppose. Is
Mayfield's house. But now it's south of your district, then, isn't it? It's on the west side
Well,
of the road, and
it's
it's off 8th
practically
Street.
due east from ours. It's on
Okay, due east.
Worth between 6th and 8th.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's really
Merrill,
old.
Merrill and John Elliott live there now. Yeah, right.
And I'm thinking they're thinking 1830s, maybe.
Oh, definitely. I think they're one of the oldest. They've been on the historic tour, and I don't remember the details of what and of course, you know, Merrill Elliott, she knew a lot about it anyway, but the students did a wonderful opening of the house and telling the details, and, you know.
I just remember that great big guy wearing that kilt in the kitchen telling the story that day,
They
that
did
he
a
was
good
one of
job.
the researchers. And I thought, well, you don't see that in Cleveland every day.
Right.
That house is attributed to Thomas Callaway as well.
Is
We were
it?
talking about him earlier.
Yeah, he
That's
was
probably
quite
right.
the builder, and I don't think cut any corners. He made the
You know,
best
and
houses.
he used Pleasant Craig Miles, I think, as for supervision on a lot of that as well.
I think
you're-
I think there was an association there, and then I've been looking at the Ocoee district map from 1840 recently, and Thomas had a good eye for land too. And if it had a spring on it, he bought it. And being one of the surveyors and being a fellow with a little bit of money, he was able to really buy up some really. He owned Ginger Wilson's farm, and he owned Wildwood Lake. He just owned a lot of big pieces of property, and he came down in downtown where he could see, you know, good property.
No, we were talking about, you were asking about water supply. There was a well in our backyard as well as a cistern.
Yeah,
we were
cistern.
told, to catch water.
And now it's a water feature, right?
Yeah.
Did you have a water feature?
There you
back
go.
then?
I took a young police officer. He called me one day and said that somebody had reported that someone had bulldozed down some graves, and he went down and looked, and he couldn't tell what he was looking at. Would I go with him? Well, I met him down there on one snowy day, and I looked at it, and I said, "That's a cistern. That's not a gravestone. That's a cistern." And he goes, "Whose sister?" Well, it's kind of like a well, but it's kind of like a water gathering system.
Well, you know, years ago, too, most people had goldfish ponds out behind their house. And growing up, it was a big part of our childhood to be over at my grandmother's right next door to Arnold School. She had a goldfish pond, and she would make little fishing poles and put bread on the end for us to go out and let the fish nibble. And so when we moved our house on Ocoee Street, there was an outdoor rock grill and this rock sort of raised area. And Richard got out there and started digging and discovered it was a pond, and it, you know, had the concrete bottom. And then we acquired a house next door to us, Bill Jackson's home, and we could see the outline. And so we started digging, and there was the pond. So those were just, of course, used for ornamental purposes, I suppose. But
I
most
think
people
they
had
were
a little
kind of a
pond.
symbol of I have more than what I need. I mean, you know, that's the way it was. I know that up at Caney Creek, up
Right.
in the mountains, the supervisors' homes all had the fish ponds.
Mhm.
So
There
you
was
can
a
tell.
little-
I can tell which house was the supervisor's house because there was a little pond out front.
There was a little fish pond probably from the 20s back behind the parsonage where I grew up at the corner of Centenary and Oak Street.
Was there?
In that lot between us and Miss Browder was
Yeah.
and they've covered it up. I think they must have jackhammered the top part of it. It was just a big rectangle,
Yeah.
and it was filled up with dirt by the time we got there. But it was something to mow around.
I'd say there were a
Rufus,
lot of
were
things
you,
around like that.
Are you out of the triplet family out of Black Fox?
No, we're related somehow. I'm pretty sure. My dad and his dad were Methodist ministers. My great grandfather came out of Wilkes County, North Carolina, into Anderson County, Tennessee. They lived in Oliver Springs, and my great grandfather's brother or uncle, one of those, it's a little tenuous, switch came down into Bradley County.
Oh,
So,
okay,
yeah.
okay, because their land's very well. I mean, you know, from the 1840s they were here.
And wasn't some of the triplets the bridge burners?
I don't remember the Union build.
Honestly, don't know. So I'm not going to go there.
Rufus says, I don't recall where I was on that night.
Now, Amy, tell everybody where you was raised. I can't think. I know where the house is. I can't name of the street.
Over on 21st Street.
21st
Lived at
Street.
the corner of Oakland and 21st Street.
Right.
Yeah, which was so very different from the neighborhood in which I'm living now, which was the old. And I mean, it's all tied together, but it was considered, you know, it was more of a new development over there. And it's kind of interesting. All the homes, the moms were all at home, you know, for the day and with the kids, and the dads were pretty much executives. You can kind of go around the neighborhood, and we were talking about that this morning. I'd have to look at some. And it was like, you know, Bobby Taylor, who was the banker, and Luke Lee Harrell, who was executive VP at Brown Stove, and Curtis Moore across the street, who had more furniture. And but they all were executives, and the families were. I don't remember many people ever moving in and out. You know, everybody raised their families there, and they stayed, and it was an interesting atmosphere that we all grew up in over there. And then most of the young people, you know, Jim Park and Scott Taylor and that whole crowd, Jim Gibson, they've all stayed here in Cleveland and have done well and continued their involvement and contribution to the community. So,
Who lives in that house now?
which house?
The one that you grew up in.
Okay, my sister lives there.
Oh, okay.
We were excited when Ann wanted to live there, and it's got property. It's grandfathered in. She has her horses back there occasionally. So it's a little mini farm right there in downtown Cleveland, and the property backs up to the hospital, which we used to laugh and say we felt safe living by the hospital. Well, now there's so many, you know, people that occasionally end up at the hospital for all sorts of mental illness or drug abuse or whatever. But Ann's had a few occasions where people were dismissed, and the hospital doors now, the emergency room doors, open up into the parking lot that opens up to the back of her property, and a few of them have made their way back to her barn or once inside of her house. But so anyway, so it's the atmosphere of that was a little bit different.
But she's always got friends.
What?
She's always got
She
friends.
always has
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But she has, you know, she's got a goat, and like I said, she occasionally has her horse over there. So we're happy that she lives there and has
She
maintained
just
the
needs
property.
one of those little burrows out there to run people out.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And then Will Jones, my nephew, bought the Curtis Moore home right across the street and just completed a really nice renovation on that.
Right.
And Bill and Judy Chandler bought the Harrell home, the Luke Lee Harrell home, right across the street, and did a big renovation on that. So that neighborhood thrives and is still doing well. And David May just came in and did an interesting renovation. It was there's a few contemporary homes within that nest of
That was the Brydendahl
the
home.
Brydendahl home. He was a chemical engineer, maybe here with Olin.
Right. He came with Olin. He was
With
one of
Olin.
the executives at Olin.
So there are 3 contemporary houses through the neighborhood. The first was Lawrence Renfro, right up the way, and then Dr. Kimball, who is still there, still living, radiologist here in town, raised his family there, and now David May has redone and updated this Brydendahl home, which was considered a 1950s sort of.
Is that the one right next door going back toward Turquoise Street on the left?
Well, looking, when you come up Pearl Avenue, where in our home is right there where it dead ends into 21st,
Right.
to the right is the Renfro home, which is very
Okay.
contemporary,
Right.
interesting home. To the left, at the corner of Oakland and 21st Street, is David May's home, the one he's just redone.
Okay.
But it's
So the one
definitely,
up
it's
the-
a mid-century home.
One
I
to the
should say,
right
not
was
50s, but
Renfro.
Renfro.
Lawrence.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
the Brydendahl house, I guess, would have been more in the 60s. It's considered mid-century, which is really coming kind of back into style, and people are loving. So they've done it. It's different, you know. It's got a whole different look.
So the house you grew up in, what year was it built?
You know, we had I don't remember what year it's built. Alan's probably listening to this, and he should call in. But anyway, but then my parents renovated it when I was about in the 3rd or 4th grade. I don't know dates like he does, but it was really just a little tenant home. It probably was part of, you know, a home that was part of the farm where some of the workers lived. And then my parents bought it, and just it was a cute home, and then they renovated and added on. So he'll have to call him.
I think
today.
probably one of the nicest new builds out of old materials that I have witnessed is Tim McCoy's sister. She's down in the Red Hill Valley, and she went over beyond her grandmother's house to grandma's original house when she got married, and they stripped everything they could out of that house. She was out in the neighborhood taking wood off the side of her daddy's barn with his permission, mind you, and the floors and things in that house are absolutely, she can tell you where every floor came from.
Yeah.
And then once you start doing stuff like that, people want to give you pieces to go in the house that go with that furniture.
That's
so
true.
she's got the doctor's cabinet out of Dr. Davis's house from the late 1800s. And
Deb, I just got an idea for a show coming up. Is putting up with Alan Jones growing up.
I have some stories.
I bet you do.
He blew our mailbox off with the cherry bomb, and my parents
He
were
tells
so
that on himself.
my parents were so convinced it was a federal offense and we might all go to prison that from that day forward, our mail was then sent to P.O. Box 1015 on 2nd Street.
can't stop him from
At Dad's
that's funny.
office. So, yeah, we had a lot of explosions in the neighborhood. Jeff Renfro and Chip Kyle, who's a radiologist here in town, they acquired some dynamite from a construction site and set it off down at Gray Emerson's property, shook the neighborhood a little bit. They blew a few
A
things.
bit of ancient history. All of those houses there were on my paper route. I carried the
love
Times
it. The time.
from 21st Street to Centenary, from Ocoee to Keith.
And how old were you?
Oh, goodness. 13, 14, 15.
Oh, well, that's a little bit older. We've had some people that were 8 and 9 that rode their bicycles delivering newspapers, and I think you'd be charged with abuse now for making a child do something like that.
Well, I carried the
it's
Free
good for
Press
you.
before that, and had Ganaway Hardware, and
Spent a lot of time there. Rode our horses from 21st Street down to Ganaway, and
Oh,
just
yes.
and right where Taylor Springs is, we would just drop the reins and go in and look at all their tack and,
And just
you know,
leave the
come
horses
out with
in.
some sort of something.
We
Well,
had,
Ron always says that his dad would go in there to get stuff, and Ron would just smell the leather.
I
He wanted a
loved it.
saddle. He didn't have a horse, but he
I
wanted
wanted
to
a
Daddy,
saddle.
We
Daddy, buy
loved
me a
it.
saddle.
well,
It's a good
we had
film.
was it
Bob.
Bob Ganaway come in
His
and do a
sister
show.
in.
They
Not
come
to-
in and they talked about the store, and it's pretty amazing, you know, that. But it was sort of a landmark. Everybody, at least you remembered the smell of the leather,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
nothing else.
well, they had a trap door that every once in a while they would raise up, and you could look down at the spring.
Yes.
And it cooled the building.
It
Didn't have a
did.
system for cooling.
He run the
Yeah.
water up into radiators, car radiators, and had fans behind it. And then up front, he had a water fountain. He called it a bubbler. Just the water from the spring come up, just a natural. So,
I'm looking forward to that park being
It's going to be good.
in place. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be real good.
Yeah, it's
I
going to be
think it's
good for
gonna
Cleveland. But yeah, Ganaway's was always
Awesome.
a destination because, I mean, we really did ride horses all over Cleveland, Tennessee. We rode on Key Street or 75 when they were building it. That was a big destination.
what was
So-
the little store down at Georgetown? I mean, still down there, right on Key Street. It wouldn't have been Key Street then, but
What'd they sell, dear?
it was a little grocery store down on 17th. Triplet? No, not Triplet.
Stewart's?
You're not talking about Stewart Park Plaza,
That's
the little
Stewart Park
Yeah.
Grocery.
Yeah,
grocery. Yeah,
You see what I
Yeah.
live with? I get one hint, and I
Y'all
have
just
to go with
so
it.
much information in your head.
And then it
yeah,
became
Watson's.
Watson's. It was one of the Watson's
Yes.
Yeah,
stores.
but it was Stewart Park. We went there every day. My mother put us in the back seat of the station wagon, and we went every day to get whatever we needed. She never bought for the next day.
And I'm
So
sure
we went
you were
daily.
all strapped in those car
No, we
seats.
stood up, and she would put her arm over like this when she'd come to the stop sign, just sort of like that. But we did just fine.
We- and
We all survived somehow.
somehow,
Yeah.
somehow. Now, Rufus, did you graduate from Bradley?
I did.
And what year
In
was
64.
that? In 64. That class of 64. We've had so many people in here that graduated that year. Some
64,
really
65.
interesting folks.
Now, I would imagine Amy was probably a Cleveland High School graduate.
I was, and I remember you driving your car around at Hardee's. Everybody would cruise Hardee's.
Yeah.
I remember it very well.
Yeah.
I was 74, class of 74.
Yeah.
I was the 72, last class of the old school at Bradley. Then
Oh, is that right?
well, they moved down here to this new thing down the other end. But I remembered, Amy, I remember driving through the Cleveland High parking lot when it was still gravel. In the early days, it was gravel, and
And you could throw rocks everywhere? Is
well,
that what-
it was
Probably get your car going, and
it was a Bradley Cleveland week, and there'd been some bonfires, and so me and my friends got in my old Chevrolet, and we was going to go up there and yell at the Cleveland people. Well, I got in the Cleveland parking lot, and the car dies. It was just like in the movies.
it's not good for your image.
And here I am, and finally I got the car started, and those poor Cleveland guys behind me. A lot of gravel went on them, and
Yeah.
You was trying to get out of there.
yeah. So, but
Well, we were talking about modern houses in the midst of older houses. I think the Dice, is it the Dice house on that Doris and Jim Burns had on Centenary Avenue? It was more like a Frank Lloyd Wright looking house to me.
That was always the story. Was it originally a Frank Lloyd Wright design?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that that there's some plans somewhere that's Frank Lloyd Wright design. So, of course, that house is going under a major renovation right now with Tricia Hawes, and of course that meant she had to go before the Historic Commission, and they guided her, made sure that things were as they should be. And so anyway, it's
I think that's something that concerns a lot of people when people, when the historic districts start forming and stuff. Can I do to my property what I want to do to my property? What's your response to that?
Well, I would say you can do what you want within reason.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for the historic district and the commission is to be certain that things don't get so out of hand that it just doesn't fit with anything else that's around it. That's part of keeping the integrity of the architecture, so that you don't wind up with a hodgepodge that causes the neighborhood really to start to go down, rather than what has happened under the commission and the historic designation of property values have come up.
absolutely they've gone up, and there's a lot of we do hear a lot of that, and there's some backlash with that. Excuse me, but overall, the state comes in and puts these guidelines in. It's not like this panel of 7 that the mayor appoints to the Historic Commission makes up things that they decide are appropriate or not. There's a guideline set in place because you can't legislate on good taste. You have to legislate on historical significance. And I think the commission, it's not an easy job. There's like I said, there's sometimes some misunderstanding of what they're trying to do. But for instance, the house that we bought next door to us, at one point there was a fellow that wanted to come in, wanted to put a tin roof and a split rail fence across the front. Well, that's not at all in keeping with what that house originally looked like. And so it really is preserving history and keeping property values where they should be. And things have really blossomed since all this has been put in place.
Well, when you start to invest your money, you want to know that the neighborhood's going to be maintained.
100%, exactly. That's very true. And it gives you expectations. When you go into these, let's say, new neighborhoods, they normally have their neighborhood restrictions and all of that. And of course, when you get into a mixed neighborhood like we have, and that's kind of what our neighborhood association tried to do. And then the historic district is even more concentrated. And some people, they'll say, well, if I want to do this, I want to do this with my own property. Well, if you buy within the historic district, which is really a very, very small part of our Cleveland, Bradley County area, you are pretty much saying you're going to follow the set of guidelines.
Just like a homeowners association.
Yeah, it's such a tiny area, and that's what people, I hope, will keep in mind, that this preservation effort is really important. Really, really important.
There are subdivisions or development that has restrictions on it, and when you go in, you can only build so many. It has to be this many square feet. They have to be these type of roofs. It can't be this. You can't put up a 4-story purple lighthouse.
Right.
Exactly.
Or split rail fence. I mean,
Right.
However, it was really cute in a cabin, by the creek.
But it was never correct for the area, and that's what the guideline. They've got a big handbook that they follow. They don't make up any of the,
So when you buy, especially the folks that are buying in, you know exactly what you're getting into the day that you buy. Now, Rufus, I want to ask you about and you may not know anything about it, and you may know a lot about it. I don't know. Oh, let's get this call. I've got it written down so I won't forget.
Good morning.
Ron, I've got a story about Alan Jones I'd like to tell you.
Okay.
Watch out.
We'll just call this Alan Jones the storytelling day. In the early 60s, my brother used to ride his motor scooter over there, and he had a toboggan on his head. And I think my brother was about 12, and Alan was a little bit younger than my brother. And anyway, he used to come out there. He used to play basketball in his backyard, and he'd come out there and call my brother. He used to call him the toboggan kid. And until this day now, when he sees my brother, he still calls him the Toboggan Kid.
That's because Alan can't
doesn't
remember his name.
He doesn't forget things.
He used to get back in his backyard and shoot basketball, and I used to run out there and kid my brother, but he didn't mean nothing by it. He just was a kid, and anyway, I thought you'd like to hear that.
That's funny. Thanks, Bullet. I was wanting to ask you, at 20th Street, coming south, there's some kind of fairly new house there, and then there's a carriage, looks like an old carriage house that's been converted into a house, and then the big white house, the McClanahan house, I believe is the name of the people that live there. What do you know about that carriage house? It looks extremely old to me.
I'm trying to place where you're talking about.
It's on the left as you're going south on Ocoee.
Mm-hmm. The big white house with the big white columns.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, between it and
There's a
20th
house
Street,
that,
it's a little, looks like
the front door now is on Ocoee, but what I understand about the house, that what was the front yard of it, which faced 20th Street, now has smaller houses in it.
I see.
And so that house originally.
So you think it was a
20th
house?
Street.
Okay. That would make
I'm
sense.
sorry, I don't know that much about it.
But it is
You're
extremely
talking about
old.
that brick house right there next to,
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay, where David Pemberton lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my grandmother actually lived in that house for a while.
That little house?
That little brick house, a long time ago. when they
It
were
looks to be old.
building.
The bricks look very
It
old.
looks
Yeah,
very
it's
old.
old. It is old.
Very
1800s.
I'd say
Yeah.
mid 1800s or
Think
earlier.
so.
And the big white house, I know the big white columns probably went on there in the 60s, the 1960s, from what I understand. But I've never found a definitive date on it either.
It may have been earlier. It's pre-Civil War, from
I
what
would
I
think so.
understand. And what I've been told is that it originally was a house with a dog trot. It was
That's what I'm
And
thinking.
has
I'm
been,
thinking it could be a removal house, is
re-
what I'm thinking.
adapted as time came
Mm-hmm.
along. The columns may date to the 1950s.
Maybe. I just know that they were
Date to the
added
time
much
that,
later.
I don't
Bethel
remember
Browns
those never
lived.
being.
See, I don't either.
We were, we were on Ocoee Street all the time, and I don't remember that house ever
Not having
those,
them.
right.
Now, what about the house at the corner of Ocoee and 20th Street that's on the west side of the street, and it's got maybe some kind of orange-looking trim on it now or something? Someone bought it a few years ago and looked like they were going to renovate it, and then it looks like it's deteriorating
That
again.
house has always looked like that. You may know a little bit about it, Rivers, but even as a child, I took piano lessons across the street in that little house, and that house always looked unlived in and kind of slightly less than kept. Never known a thing about it other than that.
The Randolphs lived there, and one of their sons was big with Coca-Cola Thomas down in Chattanooga Bud, and he then went on down to Coca-Cola in Atlanta. But it was the Randolph parents that lived there.
Do you think someone lives there now? Can you tell?
I don't know. I'd say in the last
It doesn't ever look like
5
anybody
or
lives
7
there.
years.
No, it's even
Someone
as a child,
came-
I
yeah.
don't remember it looking.
I remember
any
them
different.
having a dumpster out front, and they took the roof off. They put a new roof on, and then I've never seen anyone coming
It's
or
sort of
going.
a funky color
Yeah,
now. It's
like
almost like orange
orangey,
and purple or
peachy
something
color.
today.
I'd like to know about it. Now, one street back, what is that street? Is that Chambliss?
Chambliss.
Chambliss at 20th Street. That 2-story house there is very nice. That someone renovated.
Old
Kind
farmhouse.
of, yeah.
The Doughertys lived there, and Jane was a little behind Bob Johnson, but she married Bob Johnson. Their
Oh,
daughter.
okay.
And Mr. Dougherty came in, I believe, with Olin as well.
We got a lot of good people when Bowater and Old came into this
Oh,
community.
That's a
Absolutely.
good point. Very good point. Yeah.
Good morning, you live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron.
Hey, Red.
Hey, Red, what's up, sister?
Hey, I heard y'all mention something about the McClanahan house.
Uh-huh.
Didn't that used to be a hospital when the war was going on?
Well, I have never seen that in writing or any documentation. I have never really researched the house, but I think that, you know, if I was on Ocoee Street back in the Civil War, I would have been in Amy's house at the corner of, and I would have been in the house Rufus lives in now, and I would have been in that house because those were the nicest houses in the area. So I would think that there were hospitals in all those houses, or I would think that I don't think Sherman was on that street ever, but, you know, if I was some leader, I would have been in those houses.
Well, it was big enough because I used to help clean it.
And I imagine the more you cleaned, the bigger it seemed.
Oh, yeah, big old rooms and the upstairs to it. I knew her real well.
Mm-hmm.
It's up for sale now, I think.
There's a rumor that she might want to sell.
Well, it's not her.
Look at Ron shaking his head no.
I don't know.
No, Deb.
I've been meaning to get me a historic house. The only thing historic about my house is Ron Moore grew up in it.
One daughter lives in it. The other one moved somewhere else, but they're fighting over it. So I think they're going to sell it.
Oh, my.
I thought we were going to end up with the Henniker house in Charleston when it went for sale.
Oh.
Deb kept saying, well, yeah.
That would be-
And I went, I said, no, no.
That would
We
be a
owned the
good
Cloud
place.
House
Yeah.
in Polk County for about 15 minutes.
But I'll
one
tell
time.
you one thing about that house, if you go and buy it, every time it rains, the basement floods.
Hmm. That's what we were talking about earlier, is that I imagine that whole area was kind of swampy at some point in time.
Yeah, because we've helped pump the water out of that thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for calling, Red. It's always good talking to you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Well, the water was a mixed blessing.
Mm-hmm. It
You
is.
wanted to be where you could be close to water, or you didn't have to dig a deep well to get to water. But then you also have the flooding issues that we still
Now,
experience.
Rufus, do you remember before the card house that's there now?
No, I don't remember back that
Okay.
far.
Well, no, I really think
I'm a
that's
fossil, but I don't remember back that far.
1956. I mean, 1956. They tore down the old Lee house, and the Cards built that house. It's what I. Now, y'all see, I didn't read that anywhere. That's just up in my brain somewhere. I was just wondering.
I
I'm
had
sure.
understood that the Cards owned whatever the house there, and they probably Bobby Card's parents,
Yeah.
and that then they decided to build the current house.
Yes.
Of course, there's a big spring there that
Yes.
feeds a branch that goes down into
Yes.
Philhour Branch.
And I'm sure that was the Lee, Caswell Lee's house or somebody. Let's get this call.
Go ahead, caller.
Ron, this Bob.
Hey, Bob Cash, how are you?
Good, thank you. Listen, I just heard Red call in and about cleaning houses, and why don't she clean my house for me?
I don't think you got that much money, Bob.
I thought she might do it. You know, this free gratis.
Amy, you know Bob Cash, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
I
yeah.
do.
We have Amy Banks in here. Or it used to be Amy Jones.
Yeah. Hi, Amy.
Hello.
You ain't got any stories on Amy, do you?
Amy is a precious lady. She has done a lot for Mayfield School, and she does a lot for the folks of Cleveland. She's a fine lady.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Well, listen, Ron, if you're talking to Red, you tell her I need my house cleaned up.
All right. Well, you'll have to put on more than your underwear when she comes cleaned up the house, though.
Oh, man, that takes all the fun out of it.
I
Hey,
know.
Bob, do you still have anything for sale?
Oh, yes, I was going to mention that. I do have quite a bit left at a bargain, and I'm going to start today at 2 o'clock. It's a pretty day. And I'm going to start at 2 o'clock, and if the folks would give me a call, I'll give directions. My number is 508-7649.
Sounds good, Bob. Have a good day.
If you got money, he'll sell it.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Hey, folks, we got to take our morning break here. After the commercials, we always play a song called Gone Home. We dedicate that to all the people in our community, particularly remembering Keith Beatty and Paul Isom that passed away this week. And if your family is among those, we honor them also. We'll be back here in just a few minutes, folks.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WHOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. The cash you need today is waiting for you at Check Into Cash. It's your money, so come in and get it.
Get a payday advance today for up to $425. At Check Into Cash, we make it quick, easy, and confidential.
The cash you need is right here, so stop worrying and stop in to Check Into Cash today.
Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Hardwick Clothes, America's oldest tailor-made clothing company, has been making our best-selling navy blazers for 134 years. Visit Hardwick.com to get the $295 wrinkle-resistant travel blazer at the price of $195. Order by 3 and get by 10. 3 next day air. Hardwick.com, America's oldest, and sewn in Cleveland, Tennessee since 1880.
All of my friends that I loved yesterday have gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. The songbirds are singing. The dell seem to say have gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of here gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. Life here is lonely since they've gone before. Gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. The old weeping willow that stands by the door sadly sighs. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of pure gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. Where the old town goes. They moved it on north to here. Shop on. Where the old town goes. Did my hometown get old? Did all my friends get old? Are they all gonna have to be told?
You want to keep that independence that she has. You want to revive it, keep it vibing. You want to keep your independence revived. One way of doing that domestically, it was to move one of y'all have to move down to Harlem.
We don't know who that was talking.
That was the Matador snuck in our conversation somehow, and I was looking underneath the table. He could be hiding
He could be
underneath it.
standing up under
He
the
could
table.
just be waking up
Yeah.
from the weekend here. So, hey, you're back. You're listening to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. We got Amy Banks and Rufus Triplett here. We're talking about the Cleveland Historical District, the beautiful historical homes of Bradley County. Not all of them are big fancy homes either. Some are just more
Some
of
are
a,
just classic cottages and
railroad houses.
But it's that area of Bradley County that was its early years of Bradley County and Cleveland, And that's my phone doing something over here now. Noises are coming from everywhere. But it's a historical, and I'm so glad that we do that. There's a lot of communities that haven't done that. It helps save our history. You know how Deb and I preach about that. It's important that you do that. Architect, pictures, stories, folklore, all this is very, very important history to our community. And this architect is even is very, very interesting. And my phone's still making.
Next week on our show, we're going to have a young man named Sean Patch, and he's coming all the way from North Carolina, and he's an archaeologist, and he's just completed a study on Hiwassee Island, and he's going to start a study on Ledford Island for TVA, and I believe we'll have a representative from TVA here also to help with that conversation. So that's what's coming up next week, Ron.
And pretty interesting,
Somebody keeps calling Ron.
Here, Byron, talk to Deb. Excuse me there. The Hiwassee Island, amazing what he discovered on there. They do this ground rating radar, and Hiwassee Island, of course, some people call it Jolly Island, which Sam Houston lived on. And first thing before I tell anybody, that is TVA owned land. It is federal property. If you go dig on it, you're going to prison. So do not go up.
Kind of like blowing your mailbox up.
Yeah, blowing your mailbox up. It's
Kind of like look but don't touch.
You can go look at the island. The island used to be 700 acres. It's only 360 now because of the flooding from TVA. But pretty interesting what he found on this island. It's pretty amazing what he found. So, and once again, we're getting back to the historical district. You can call us here at 614-5553. There's 640 homes. Who's some of the other people live in the area, and you know anything about their houses? You know
Well, I think one house that's interesting is across Centenary Avenue from Amy and Richard is the old Hurt house. It was built by Mr. Bob and Miss Kate Hurt. It's kind of a
Now, what did they
nouveau
do?
style.
Yeah.
What did they do?
Miss Kate was Mr. Bob's sister. He was a well-known engineer, and I've been told he was the principal engineer for the building of the Flume Line
Okay.
in the Ocoee Gorge.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, and now Dr. Kahn's daughter, Vanessa Hammond, and her husband and children live there,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been good stewards of that home. But it is a little different architecture, and that's what makes an older neighborhood interesting. There are no two houses that are exactly alike. It's not like going into a subdivision.
It's sort of a flat, square-looking type house, isn't it? One across
What
from.
would you call that? Did you refer to that as a certain style? I'm sure it is. It's got its name.
It does. It's kind of a transition from the teens to the 30s. I'm not exactly
Right. Straight lines, clean lines, and the Lee History Department they've opened their home up for the tour, and I don't remember the specifics of it, but it was definitely considered. It had, it was drawn up by an architect, and it had its significant design lines.
What about the big white house with the big columns across from Lee there? Whose house is that?
That's Sam and Ann McReynolds. It was built by
39.
her parents, Reeves Brown.
Reeves Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the president of Hardwick Stove.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the really good thing about the tour of homes that's been done several times is that those Lee University students do all that research, and it's preserved.
It is excellent. They do an excellent job. We work with Dr. John Coates over at Lee. He's the one that puts that together, which is different from I think it's Randy Woods does the tour of the cemetery.
Yes.
But all this comes together as a wealth of information and resources. And if you are asked to do your home, I highly recommend it because they do fantastic research, and they give you the research and the results of their research. And I mean, we learned a lot. There was had been a slave that lived at our house named Sally, and things that we really had not gone back and didn't know about. So it's well worth. And it's certainly preserving things. And, Lee University's been a great resource to our neighborhood. We went in with their communications class, and they pretty much designed our website, which you can go to. It's www.historiccleveland.org. And it's a wealth of information about how we got started back in 2002 to 2004, when our plan that was done by Dr. George Bowen, like I said before, up at UT, was then registered with the city. It's on file there. You can look at it on here, and how we came to create this way to preserve our neighborhood. And so, but Lee's communication class put our website together as a senior project, and they did a great job and presented us then with a nice glossy booklet of how to lay it out and what to do, and then we had it's up and running, and we've really appreciated their
Tell
help.
us that website again.
It's www.historiccleveland.org. Lots of great pictures of the homes, lots of resources about what goes on in downtown. And so, when realtors come through and with people coming through, we refer them to check that out, because it tells you a lot about what it's like to live downtown. Or as I say to Richard, we can't move now, we're too close to the hospital.
Yeah.
So there's assets to living downtown and
Right.
living near Lee, and having sidewalks and neighbors and a sense of community. And then we do a lot of things as far as, just keeping up with what's good for the neighborhood and being vigilant about watching to make sure things are, done right and there aren't violations.
See, Ron, there's advantages to living in that White House that's for sale.
There are a lot of advantages. And
Absolutely.
Thanks,
you can
Amy.
get free meals over at Lee University. I'm not free. You can walk over. You don't have to cook.
Yeah.
It's not free. You can go pay. But, gosh, you can go over there and have some
Their
Chick-fil-A.
their food's great in their cafeteria.
Oh, we have, it's a great, you just walk across the street.
And let me mention Richard, her husband, Richard Banks, is a city councilman, and we do appreciate his service to our
His
community.
efforts, yes.
That's, I tell you, being a local politician is a lot tougher than being the president, I think, because you live right next door to the
Everybody
people who
knows
vote.
who you are.
That's right. So tell Richard we do appreciate
Well,
what
I
he does
appreciate
for that.
And Richard's worked hard, and we've got a lot of good city council members that have helped us preserve downtown, and then, come along and work with the state on the Historic Commission as well. So it's been a big joint effort. But I did want to give a shout out to Lee and thanking their communications class for
But
doing
if you
our
start down at the
website.
monument there, going there, over on the side of, if you're going north and you're facing the side you're on, there's the house right there on the corner, and I don't know who does that. And then there's the Craig Mile House, which is now the library.
Mm-hmm.
I think John Stansbury lives in the next house,
Right.
and
They've opened their home before too
They
for the
have,
tour.
Yeah.
and it's a neat home, an interesting home with a lot of interesting artifacts. John's got some interesting things in there. But speaking of the library, the history.
I heard
branch
John was a
library.
Republican.
Really?
Really?
I've never.
Are you sure?
I just
Does
heard
he
that.
talk
I'm
about
not.
that?
I'm not sure.
Does he
but
share that?
Yeah, he's a real quiet about
What,
that.
what were you going to say?
Well-
By the way, there's a wonderful renovation going on at the history branch.
That's what I wanted to share. And,
Yes.
it's the history branch has sort of been a little bit forgotten with all the renovation of the big library across the street. But there's a big effort right now going on. They've just repointed all the bricks. They've got a donor that is matching funds. And it's a wonderful place to, if you've got
They've
a
painted
big
most.
heart
you
to
haven't-
donate and do something good for the library, the history branch, it is absolutely a jewel in the historic district. Go by and look.
I was so pleased with the new ramp.
Yeah.
There had been a ramp there for 30 years, but it was really too steep to use,
Right.
and now it's usable. So if you need to go up a ramp instead of the stairs,
All the trim is painted outside
the trim's
now.
painted, and they're
Yeah.
getting
All
ready
being
to
redone.
start on the inside. We
Right.
had some water damage there probably 4 years ago when a nice little squirrel decided to build a nest in the drainage system, and it backed the water up, and it messed up the plaster, and it just did some horrible damage. We're getting a call, Ron.
Good morning, you live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ronnie. And
Hey,
Good
how
morning,
are
darling.
you?
How are you?
well, I'm doing pretty good, I guess, today. But last week I was. I wanted to thank you for playing that song because you mentioned over the seal, all that's going on in France and Paris.
Yes.
I have 2 nieces and a nephew that's over there. And they're going to try to get over here if they can and get out of that mess.
Okay.
Well, good luck to them.
Pardon?
Good luck to them.
Pardon?
Good luck to them.
Oh,
We hope they make it.
yes, and just say a prayer that they can get over here they've been over here twice, and they came to see me once. It was so bad there last time they came, they couldn't get here because, the snow was on the ground and all. So I finally got a hold of my niece Thursday morning, and she gave me all the information, and I was wondering if they were okay or not, So anyway, we didn't get to hear our song last Saturday. Did you notice that?
We did. We played it.
Yes, but he cut you off, honey.
Okay.
So you tell that manager that I said to not cut our song off no more.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice Thanksgiving.
You too. We're going to play your song. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
The house.
You heard that, Daniel Brantley.
The history branch is a real jewel. And I know that I have a lot of fond memories of having to whisper a lot there.
It was the library.
When it was the library.
Oh, it was so exciting to go in, and was it Miss Bowman was the librarian?
I think so.
And she wore glasses that hung down on her nose. As a child, I was so fascinated, but most fascinated by her pencil that had the stamp on it, and she could write and then stamp. So I thought that's the best thing I've ever
seen. Right there, boy. That's
the things
modern.
you remember as children. But that was it's very exciting to go up there as a child, and then my daughter Allison won the reading contest at Mayfield School in first grade because we had such close access to the library. We would walk up there, she would sit and get the books and read, and anyway, but there's advantages to being close to the library as well.
It's a beautiful building, and I'll be glad when we get it all spiffed up and we can.
It's a good thing, and they are doing some fundraising right now. So if you're looking for something, a good cause, it will be money well spent.
Absolutely.
So we're excited, and they're really wanting to have more opportunity to have people come in there and do book clubs. I'll mention that too. They're wanting people to, if they want to come in and do their book club, to give them a call. So
also across the street, the building, I know that Lee, in their progress, has had to tear down a few buildings, but they have saved a whole bunch of buildings in that community. And one that they saved is straight across the street, almost, well, it's a little bit, not exactly straight across the street, but they use it as their welcome center. Anyone new coming to Lee University will go to that building. And it was built in the late 1800s. It has 5,200 square feet, 6 fireplaces, and 3 full bathrooms. And it has 2 front doors because one door was used, they used it a lot for funeral viewings in the 1900s. And so you would go straight into that room to view. And a lot of times I call those coffin doors because the door it looked like a window, but you could open the window up and it came all the way down to the floor. So it'd be easy to get in big objects like pianos or caskets or those things. But it was also Lee's Tourist Inn in 1949, and I believe the last time I went into that building, it still had the numbers on the doors.
I remember the sign out front that said, I think I remember Miss Lee's boarding house.
Something like that.
And my aunt was friends with her, and I have some memories of that.
Mr. Hamilton bought the property in 1974 from Margaret Lee Montgomery and remodeled it. And his family lived there 23 years, and then after he passed, it sat there empty for 7 years.
Was it that long?
And then Lee University thankfully bought it, acquired it, and refurbished it. And they said they just think it gives people insight to what the community's like to come in that beautiful old building.
Yeah.
They were, of course, that Lee was spelled Lea, I think.
Yes, it was.
And, of course, Broad Street used to be Lee Street.
Yes, it was.
The Lees were very prominent in early politics. And
then it became fashionable for cities to name their widest street Broad Street. You know, there's a Broadway in Charleston, there's Broad Street in Chattanooga, and that gave people a hint to the fact that you could turn around a 6-horse team in the street, and it was always the widest street.
So you knew if you,
And I know that's, so now you know. But Ocoee Street obviously came from the Ocoee district, and Central Avenue was once Berry Street, named after our first mayor, I believe, or alderman, whatever that is.
Don't look at me. I don't have any.
You don't have anything.
She was wanting me to add to that conversation. I'm going, no.
One of the things I think would be an interesting show sometime, Debbie, would be how street names have changed.
Yes.
And there were some major changes, and in the names, or where the street numbering started back in the 1800s versus how it works
We
now.
have a little copy of a flyer at home, and I believe it was it may have been the back of a telephone book or a city directory that says 33rd Street is now, whatever street, but 8th Street that came across there, that comes across at the library, beside the library, was Pine Street for a number of years.
Oh, really?
And you'll see it listed, something about Pine Street, and that's 8th Street.
Well, I can tell you back years ago when I worked with the Sheriff's Department, Benton Pike was a good example, an old road in Bradley County, an old toll road. They'd send you to an address, and address really had nothing to do with it. You had to find the landmark, because it might be 3,300, and 5 houses down, it might be 14. And people had just numbered their houses what they wanted to for years and years, and this is before 911 come in and renumbered all that. So there was no system to it there. So you'd be in the 200 block, the 3,000 block, it just went crazy down through there. So you had to say what's that near?
Exactly.
That's where the dog lays out
the big
by
yellow
the
dog lays out there by the fence. That's where you turn. And if he's not there today, you can't get there. So.
Well, and there's even some talk about some information that's been uncovered where part of Key Street on out toward Hardwick Farm was actually, I think it was voted on that it was to be named for C.L. Hardwick, a certain stretch there. So there's some discussion of that, where they discovered where it never happened.
If I had to guess about that, Ron, wouldn't you think that was... I remember when Keith Street ended there at the plaza, that Jenkins.
I remember when Keith Street wasn't there.
Well, I'm saying for a long time though, it ended right there at, is that Mouse Creek Road?
Mouse Creek.
Yeah. Do you remember that, Rufus? It ended there, and then once it was expanded north from there, I would think that was that section, but I haven't researched it. I was kind of curious at first if it might not be what's now Stewart Road, since that road wasn't there at all, and the Hardwick family gave that proper.
This was some old information taken from the council or commission meeting that it was to be named, and it never did happen. So I think it was voted anyway.
And now it's in the city, so it'd have to be a
that would
city decision to do that.
Uh-huh.
Well, that goes along the lines that Ron and I are trying to canvass for the new elementary school out on Highway 60 to be named Candies Creek Elementary School, because the original school and church for this area way prior, 1824, I believe, way prior to the removal, was named Candies Creek Mission, and somebody with a good arm would have been able to throw a rock from that new piece of property and land on the mission site. So I don't think there's anything more appropriate than that. We're always going back and digging up something.
And since the Candies Creek historical sign is missing, when and if we get the new school, it would be to put the historical sign there in the driveway.
So the children would see it.
Give the significance.
Absolutely. Let's get this call.
It'll be like a city councilman to help us pass things like this. Good morning. You're live in Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning. It's Lisa Poe Jones.
Hey, Lisa Poe Jones. What's up, sister?
Well, I listen to you at work, so a lot of times when I want to call you is the very time that my customers demand the most from me. Yes. So I was calling about, you were asking Mr. Triplett and Amy about water in their basements. And Richard has probably mentioned this to Amy before, and Nadine has mentioned to me that if we were starting Cleveland fresh today, with the laws that we have, we would not be able to build about 60% of the buildings that are here because of the water table. And I just find that so fascinating. And now that we have uncovered Taylor Springs, and it's like those people had a great idea because of the water being so accessible, but they weren't really that bright about the water when they started building things on top of it.
Yeah. Well, rules and regulations, they change things, but we all are pretty, it all works out. You just deal with it. But so you think that it wouldn't be able to even happen this day and age?
That's what Dad says.
That's really interesting, Lisa.
That is.
When you take on an old house, it's a non-ending project. There's always something.
There's always something broken or something that
you
needs
have
to be...
to be creative. You can't just expect one set of ways of doing things to make it work. You have to be creative when you own an older home.
Exactly. And I appreciate Mr. Triplett coming back to our community and redoing his family's house there, and all the other people in town who have done that too and saved our history. And earlier you mentioned Tricia Pennington's house that she is redoing on Centenary, and I didn't hear what you said prior to that, whose house that used to be. But I had the opportunity to give out candy there on Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
And we had several people come by and ask if it was a remodel or new construction, and the lady and I sitting there, we just tell everybody with straight faces that it was Halloween decorations.
Yeah, it worked for Halloween, a little spooky.
Well, I can't really think of anything any more frightening than a home renovation.
Absolutely. We just endured one.
So appropriate, but I really enjoy listening.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the great jobs that all of y'all do.
Thank you.
You said earlier that where your house was Potts Farm.
Right. Well, part of my property would have been Potts.
Which Potts is it?
I don't know.
Was it
It's
Amos Potts?
I don't know the first name. The Potts Farm.
Well, the Potts are part of the reason that Cleveland is where it is today. Anyway, there was a vote. It was either going to be at Taylor Springs or at Deer in the Water's place, which is Whirlpool now. But there was one gentleman who voted it passed. It was a tie, and one gentleman broke the tie. Well, he wasn't old enough to vote. He had lied about his age, and Cleveland became where it is today because Mr. Potts voted for it to be Taylor Springs.
I believe that was Amos Potts' son. And in recent days, I've discovered where Amos is buried, and I'm trying to get him a War of 1812 marker. So that's another project. If I live another 80 years, I'll be able to get all these projects done.
You're going to live a long time.
I'm going to live a long
got
time.
a lot to do.
I got a lot to do.
That's good. That's very good.
My mother recently passed away in July, and we have been cleaning out her house and remodeled her house and selling it. But she kept everything she ever owned, every piece of paper.
We weren't greatly.
So my pool table has been about 14 foot.
We weren't terribly interested in, and of course they were interesting, and we kept a few of them. Her receipts from Cook's Food Store in the 1960s.
Where you signed your name for your grocery.
But we also found some 1830s and 1860s and 1870s receipts from her family and her stuff.
One from my great grandfather.
Wow. Well, that tells a story too.
Yeah, it
does.
Some of that
it really does. And then found some interesting pictures. Found her birth certificate in the middle of all these papers, and so.
Maybe someone has some insight that they can help me. I've been typing up the evaluations for the Cherokee property in this area, and it's talking about, and I hope I say it right, Chattahoochee Creek, however they say that word. Mm-hmm. And some of them say the waters of Chattahoochee Creek, and some of them just say Chattahoochee Creek. Have you have any thoughts on that? It's the same person doing the evaluation, so I'm thinking that
they may be talking tributaries when they say the waters of.
It might be, perhaps they had a spring on their property that ran in, and that's the nearest thing with a name, is the best I can determine. But I'm trying to place these people. I mean, I've locked up some names that I'm pretty sure is going to be the right thing. I don't think there's anybody who can argue with me.
Not many.
Let's back up, and whose idea was it to start? I mean, I know the doctor that you've mentioned, but there's always a driving force of folks.
Absolutely.
Who have a passion, who can get things done. Who were some of those people?
Well, Larry Presswood moved to Centenary Avenue, and a lot of you all will know Larry, and he was our former city planner, and Larry's quite visionary. And he recognized that there were some issues going on in the neighborhood that probably could be addressed and made better. And he moved across the street from Mary Frances Armstrong, who a lot of you all know. And the two of them got to talking, and Larry was actually in Dr. George Bowen's class up at UT, and he made a call to him, got him to come down and talk to us. And it was a good year or 2 years in the process of getting all this going, and we hired Dr. Bowen, and we just all did a little fundraising within our neighborhood with everybody's effort up and down the street. Mike and Phyllis Calloway were involved, and anyway, and so that's how it all got started. He would come down, and we would meet at Arnold School, or we'd meet at Broad Street Church, different places, and he set up this system called the anomaly process, I believe was what it was called. And we would go through and talk about all the good things about our neighborhood, all the things that needed help, and then discuss what was really important to us. So it was an interesting process. And so that was how it got started. And it was a lot of, getting flyers out to people, saying to come and meet, putting it on the radio, putting it on in the banner, of getting to people to come and give feedback. And people were just anxious to get there and get to talk about it all. So we had some really big meetings, and that's how it started coming together. And we, like I said, we did some fundraising, and people would say, well, I'll give $100 and I'll do this. And we raised enough to...
Money always matters.
To get Dr. Bowen to come in. But Larry was our connection.
There you
because
go.
he'd had him. And like I said, Larry's very visionary, and would see things about how having even like a historic commission in place that kind of guided people on building and how to do it the best way that fit to our neighborhood. So that was a lot of different people. But right now, Mike Calloway is our president. Nick Lilios has been our president, and we've had a lot of good guidance and a lot of involvement. And we have we're getting ready to, Christmas to be up at Rufus's for the Christmas parade. They're kind to host our neighborhood to come in for the Christmas parade. So we've been 12, 15 years now in the process of all this, and it's amazing everything that's taken place. We started out doing certain things for curb appeal, even doing historic sign units. Tucker Duncan headed that up. You all know Tucker Duncan, Eddie Duncan's son, and was very involved in really helping to give our neighborhood curb appeal. I work with the city forester, Dan Hartman, along with Joe Benjamin, to do streetscaping, because these were all things that Dr. Bowen's final plan had in place that we needed to do. So when you go down Ocoee Street and you see all the crepe myrtles planted in the tree yards, those used to just be little sections of grass that were mowed, but now we've got crepe myrtles, and we do everything possible to create curb appeal and to plant where we can. But he kind of set our neighborhood plan up like you would a city. For instance, like there's communications. Somebody would be in charge of communications. Somebody would be in charge of Parks and Rec, code enforcement. So we gave our members, and at that point we were actually an association. We gave our members different jobs, and they followed it according to the city's plan. And those groups we're not quite as involved at that point, because we've kind of resolved so many of the problems. But that was how it all got started.
Ron, you remember, I believe we went over to Shiloh, and over the Cherry Mansion was over there, and the River Museum. And then we went a couple blocks off the main drag, and every little house had a sign out there that had the estimated date that it was built.
It had a number there, too, and you picked up a brochure.
And you could read about it.
Matter of fact, that's what when we do, Deb's doing her book on the historical homes, we're planning on doing a driving tour and have a GPS location of every historical house that we mark. Of course, your district will be a lot of it, but you go down Red Hill Valley, Charleston. There's tons of them around there. So, but there's a lot of things you can do. And of course, while we were in Shiloh, we drove through and looked at every one of those houses, like 36 houses. We drove through and looked at.
Franklin, Tennessee has a lot.
Franklin's unbelievable.
Franklin's great. Yeah.
That's when we grow up, we want to be Franklin. Let's get this call.
Good morning, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Morning, Ron.
Hey, Neil, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, same thing, different day, but that's not bad.
That's not bad. What's up?
Very interesting show. A couple of houses I was wondering about that I've noticed whenever I pass by them. There's a house over where Inman Street basically runs in or turns into 64 Highway. And of course, naturally, just by looking at it, it is extremely old. It's kind of a tan or white or blonde, I guess you call it a blonde brick house. And it's next to or very close to, if you're going out of town, it would be just before you get to that Roz foreign car repair. I just wondered if had any historic information on it.
Okay, tell me one more time the streets.
Well, it's basically where Inman, runs into and eventually becomes 64 Highway.
Oh, the Roth house, the brick house?
No, it's not the Roth house. It's I know where it is.
Oh,
It's on the left, I think.
on
as
the
you're
left,
going out.
that is a Hardwick house.
Okay.
That originally was the Hardwick house that some of the Hardwicks that were black lived.
Okay.
And then eventually George Hardwick, that worked at the woolen mills and left, he lived there. But yes, I was somebody keeps trying to remodel it, and I know it takes a ton of money.
Yeah.
But they're at least keeping a roof on it.
Yeah, at least it's still standing, and it.
And I don't know how old it is, but I would say, it's old. Like I would say, at least older than 1870.
Yeah, it really has that 18th century look. Another house too. I always notice it when I'm by there. I just look and notice it as being really old. Is a really red brick house across from Arnold School on the football field side.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about, but I don't know anything about that house.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about. I know that 1925 or so, Arnold School was built.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think most of that was kind of farmland around there. And so I would say all of those schools came in after. I mean, all those houses came in at that time or after.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the yard there for the Arnold School was a brick yard for Mr. Taylor. Was it Mr. Taylor that was a brick mason that built Hardwick Woolen Mills?
Okay.
Along with many of the other brick buildings in Bradley County.
I heard you mention the Cloud House up in Polk County, and
I owned it for 15 minutes, Neil.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Well, whoever got it, they really did a number on it, restoring it. And it appears to me that it's an active farm again.
It is. At the time, whoever had lived there had died, and they put it up for auction because there was a number of people in the family, I believe, and they auctioned off the house first. Well, we bought the house, but we understood that it might be sold as a whole, and someone from the family bought it as a whole. And of course, Ron was very happy that they bought it. Because I'd already been under that building 2 or 3 times. I was wanting that one.
I had a friend that grew up and lived in Polk County, but he's passed away several years ago, and he knew some history about the house, and something you've already mentioned. They built a kiln right there, and the brick was made, on site, and the house was, made out of brick.
Well, that's what I've heard about the Jackson farmhouse, is that they just dug the clay right out of the banks there at the Candies Creek and made those bricks, and then eventually had to paint over it.
And, of course, this was years ago, but he knew them well enough that they would allow him to look for Indian artifacts, and he had all kinds of, boxes full of Indian artifacts that he had found there. But, again, enjoying the show.
Thank you, Neil.
And carry on.
Carry on. All right.
Folks, you're listening to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. We got Amy Banks. I started to say Amy Grant, but that's a different person.
Sing for us, Amy. Sing
Amy Banks and Rufus Triplett. I got confused.
Ron had put up.
And we're talking about the Cleveland Historical District. Call us here at 614-5553. If you got a question about any of the older houses down in that district, tell us where the district is again, in case they just listened. What's the boundaries?
Roughly from the monument, 8th Street north to 20th, from Ocoee over to Harrell Avenue.
Okay.
When you go down Centenary Avenue, and that house on the very end, I want to say that that's a Hardwick house. Do you know anything about it? It's sold in recent years.
I do. My wife grew up there, as a matter of fact.
There you go.
He's got the stories.
But it was originally built by an attorney's family, Mr. Park. And he sold it to my father-in-law, John Hardwick. And so John and Shirley raised their 4 children there. And the current owners bought it after Jane's mother passed away.
Yeah.
I just knew it was in recent years, and I've always eyeballed that house too.
It's a great house. They've done a big renovation, and
They really have.
You know, I think you should make it, as you guys have done, you make it livable, but you leave as much as you can. When Ron popped up this picture, for those of you who aren't on the internet, he popped up a picture of the Carmichael Library Edition, which was generously donated, and that's now part of the library. And I popped out of my folder a picture of the house. At earlier times, it belonged to Mr. Walker, and he married one of the Hardwick girls, I believe. Let's get this call.
Good morning, live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, Ron, I want to get a hold of you and Debbie before you go air and tell you all Happy Thanksgiving.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you so
Ina Mae.
much.
You too.
I love you.
All righty.
You
You and
too.
Freddie have a good one. Bye-bye.
of course, the Carmichael house there, you know, of course, Alan donated that to the library, and the Carmichaels were our neighbors growing up. But I remember one snowy afternoon, Alan was flying down the hill along with all the buddies in the neighborhood, and was coming down 21st Street right there in front of our house, and you'd come down and make a turn onto Oakland Drive, and if you were good enough, you didn't have to slow down. You just turned hard. And Mr. Carmichael was bringing his son, also named Alan, actually home from Bradley Memorial. I think he'd had his tonsils out or something, and they hit Alan Jones.
Yeah.
And so he was checked back into the hospital, and was checked into Alan Carmichael's room. Alan Jones was, with a concussion for overnight observation. So their history goes way
I
back.
think it goes that Alan says Judge Carmichael hit him, and Judge Carmichael always said Alan hit him. You think?
Well, I think they, you know, Judge Carmichael's car was appropriately in the road, and the sled was probably making too far left of a turn.
But the nice thing about this photograph, it shows with it, the only thing is they've lost the bay window.
Yeah, that's
but, and the original of that is a lovely colored photograph. I believe I found that at our history branch, which is absolutely fabulous. But when I saw it, I said, I think I know which house that is. And here I go with my little black and white picture. And I was out there looking at it.
Well,
Look at the
well,
size of
when-
these boxwoods, too, how much they've grown.
Really have. But for anybody who's looking for information on Cleveland history, or looking at doing some genealogical work, or checking out things about your family, the history branch is a treasure trove. And I would also encourage people, if you've got information about your families, please donate them or put them on permanent loan with them, so that will help others understand how important the history of not only our city but this entire area is. It's so rich from the Cherokee
Unbelievable.
on forward. It's really
It's a
amazing.
well-kept secret, and we need to let the world know. But that's where the vast majority of all this big giant folder I have here, that's the starts on my book. And something that happened in the taxing system around here that's hurt us researchers in some ways is that in the last 10 or 15 years, our tax assessor's office had to change to a computerized system that it would not let you put a date in earlier than 1900. And so like Amy's house, on your assessment, it says 1900.
Same on ours.
Same with yours. And that's what it is that it would not allow a date earlier than that. But Doug Elrod, in his ultimate wisdom, went through before he passed and made a list of the houses that all have the 1900 list. And I've been stalking these people, driving to those addresses and looking at houses and trying to figure out which ones I could include in my book that will be for sale 60 years from now.
It was interesting that you were saying it was because of the computer system, but I had heard it was because records were lost due to fires. And
Well, all of that too.
Somebody took a shortcut and just said it was before 1900. Let's just put 1900.
Well, our friend that does a lot of that work, he's the one that told me that. And it could be a lot of
the old cards, someone took it and wrote on the back of those old cards. So they still have those.
And so,
but it's not as easy accessible now as as the computer system.
But anyway, a lot of wonderful houses have 1900.
I wanted to
now.
point out something that was probably not the first or last time Alan's ever hit his head.
The last time I
won't
know
be the
about
last.
Well, apparently it's worked good for him, though. I mean, I have to admit.
Alan also had a paper route like Rufus did. I think that was many a young man's first job that made him feel pretty independent and pretty capable. But he had a
I don't think it
route
hurt
too
him
with
at
the
all.
Chattanooga Times and
To
get
learn
up
to
at
be
the crack of
responsible.
dawn. And my mom used to just worry that he was going out on his Honda 50 to deliver papers in the dark. But somehow, how did you transport yourself around?
Well, I did it by bicycle.
Okay. Well, I guess Alan was on. No, I'm sorry. He was been on his bike. He wasn't old enough. Never mind. He didn't have his Honda 50. I have that wrong. He was on his bike. And I think a few times our mom might have driven him around. I said that wrong because he was young. 6th grade. He was in the 6th grade.
I think
if it was really a downpour or it was snowing to beat the band, Dad would take me out.
So you were
to complete the
occasionally
route, so.
occasionally driven. But I don't know. Alan got a motorcycle not too long after that, but I think it was probably more bicycle. But it was dark, and I remember it seemed scary for him to go out and to the dark to work.
Yeah.
Before school.
We just there's a lot of folks in this area that have older pictures of their home. That's what I'm looking for too, is an old picture of the home, and then we'll have a current picture of the home. And so if anybody's got any of those or know about a home that's over 100 years old, they need to let me know, because sometimes they're well disguised with vinyl siding. I know the one at the intersection of Glad Springs Road and Spring Place that belongs to Mr. Linville looks mighty suspicious to me. And I believe someone told me the other day that their grandmother, that would be in her 90s now if she was still alive, was born in that house. That's how I update a lot of things, is from families telling me their stories.
And on Deb's house, it may be a 2-room cabin. If it's still standing today and we can prove it's over 100 years old, we want to include that. There's a history in all these houses. And in your district area, it's the who's of Cleveland, Tennessee built these houses built Cleveland, Tennessee.
We had
for what we do.
remarkable, and still do have a remarkable amount of manufacturing here.
Yeah.
That were self-made, homegrown folks.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
Hard work.
There's a great exhibit that just opened down at the museum at Center at 5 Points on manufacturing in Tennessee that was put together by the East Tennessee Historical Association. It's going to be down there until sometime in January. So if you get a chance, go by and see that. It talks about Magic Chef, Dixie Foundry. It talks about Hardwick Stove, just any number of manufacturers up and down the East Tennessee corridor.
Well, you had the coffee companies out of the Knoxville area, JFG and some of those other big brands that were in there.
And the Redback Hymnal exhibit still, I mean, it's a permanent exhibit.
That's a permanent exhibit. It's certainly worth going by to see.
Yeah, it really is. We have a lady that's renting the house next door, the Jackson house, who's moved down here from Michigan, and I knew she did some gospel singing where she came from, older woman, and I told her about the Redback Hymnal. And she texted me later and said that was the most fun she's had since she moved to Cleveland, so it was real important to her to get
When
that
they had the
opportunity.
opening, it was a lot of fun. They had a quartet out front with Mr. Clark playing music. And then we went into the big room and folks sang, and it was just it was a really nice evening.
When people realize that the Redback Hymnal created and printed here, not just printed, but created a lot of the songs written by local people. And it's pretty amazing that, Cleveland's so involved in that.
I know that Mrs.
December
Hurst
5th in this month, or not this month, first Saturday of next month, of which I think is the 5th, we're going to do a show about the Redback Hymnal. We have Mr. Burns coming in. Jim Burns is coming in, and he's going to talk about that. And we'll probably sing a little bit, play some songs and sing a little bit here.
Ron, Mrs. Hurst, that was the piano player at Pleasant Grove United Methodist Church, well over 100 years old now. She was my mom, who is 86's music teacher, if that tells you anything. She has a song in the Redback Hymnal.
Oh, does she?
I did not know that till the other day, and someone was telling me.
Well, sort of.
The exhibit being there, and the Convention and Visitors Bureau here worked hard on that as well with the museum to get this permanent exhibit, but state of Tennessee has recognized it by putting Cleveland on the music trail.
Right.
that they've
Absolutely. We're
established.
right there with Beale Street in Memphis and Nashville, Rhyme Auditorium, and now Cleveland.
And
with
Elvis.
Redback Hymn.
Don't forget Elvis.
And don't
Elvis.
forget Elvis. And Ron will tell you that we started trying to put together the information on the gospel groups in this area. And oh my gosh, we just couldn't. It was unbelievable. The gospel groups, big gospel groups that came out of this area.
Well, copyright for a documentary that all the songs he was singing, the copyright problems were just unbelievable.
We were
Yes.
yeah.
It's like every song you played, you had to have a copyright approval. So.
Well, the copyright law in that case is helping someone, but it's a stumbling block to
Yes.
what you're trying to do.
Preserving history.
So,
We just didn't want to tangle with it right now. And speaking of historic things, Cleveland Speedway will be running tonight.
I think it ran last night.
It
yeah.
did run last night,
Heard
and they
it loud and clear.
Well, we're half a mile from there. It just sounds like home to us.
it was.
But they're having the Gobbler, and I think that's probably the most cars I've seen there in several years to race. And they had a nice crowd last night. So if you're really interested in loud things that go fast,
61 years now there at the Cleveland Speedway. Not March 1954 is when they ran the first race. Right after I was born, they done a celebration
yeah, that's
race.
it. That's it.
well, you have to applaud the new owners. They've really
done good.
Had a renaissance of
And they
track.
haven't had a
Yes.
bit of luck. It has rained them out, and the storm blew down their sign, and they just keep smiling and going forward. And
They had a good night last night.
They had a good night last
and
night.
a good crowd too.
Yeah,
on top
good.
of that, because we actually turn off at the racetrack, but to go to our house. So
We live on the
between
old
the
Irwin
racetrack
farm.
and the construction and APD 40, we don't have any peace anymore. We used to live out in the country, and now we live in the city limits. They come to us. And we don't live in the historical district. We live in the hysterical.
The hysterical.
You all need to come on downtown, and you
Yeah.
can still
Yeah.
enjoy the sounds of the racetrack. You need to come with the history that she's got and what she loves. We need
The
to
biggest
find you a
obstacle is
historical
we have
home.
to clean out our house to move.
Well,
And I have
there's a good reason
right,
to move there.
my
you know.
garage has more
We've
has a
lived
wide
at the
source
same
of
place
interesting
too
things.
long. Also, we're working on a documentary right now. It's about Copper Hill. It's not about mining. It's about the people who lived up on top of the ground while the mining is going on. And basically, our result is no matter if there was no trees, no grass, no bushes, no bugs, no snakes, no rats, no rabbits, there was nothing there. Life went on just like it did in downtown Cleveland. They had politics, they had church, they had baseball games, they had people who shot each other. I mean, everything happened up there, and so we're telling that story. We need old movies. If anybody has anything of Copper Hill, we'd like to see pictures of your birthday party, old 8mm film, pictures of your birthday parties, and there's no grass behind you. Or just people who drove through Copper Hill and had pictures of the...
Rufus, you remember those days?
Oh, absolutely. You'd fall leaves, you'd drive up through the gorge, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden,
Nothing.
boom, you were on the surface of the moon. Well, and the astronauts talked about they could.
Right.
That was
They
one of the
could see it,
landmarks
that's
they could
right.
pick out was the Copper Basin.
They have
Yeah.
a picture in the museum up there of that photo there. You see how this, and then there's a round circle. On the
It's
picture, it
kinda
looks like
like
a
the big
quarter, which is
storm
a
on Jupiter.
25-mile round circle where there is no trees, no grass, no dirt. There's nothing. And,
But you know what I'm discovering people did? They found the one bush in the neighborhood that they stood in front of and had their picture made. And I'm like, no, I wanted to see the Bear
well,
Hills.
somebody did bring us a great movie of the area, but it snowed.
It snowed.
And it
It
didn't
looks
have
like
the
it-
effect that we really
Oh,
needed
no,
for
true.
that.
I
But-
was so excited, and I watched it, and I went, well.
But it's pretty interesting. So we're working on that, and we have a couple other documentaries that we're starting to work on. And let me say, before we leave here today, Deb takes her last chemo treatment next Wednesday.
Awesome.
And she is cancer free, and she takes that, and then she'll take some kind of oral medication for several years. But cancer free after 1 year, about a year ago, she found cancer, and she's cancer free. And so next Wednesday's her last treatment.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Christmas
Congratulations.
It's been a long year.
You remember that old Copper Inn up there, and they used to sell
Little
samples,
trinkets.
little trinkets and rocks from out of the mine. And
Oh, I don't
whatever.
remember that. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah,
Well, they would do, I don't know what the miners called it, but there was someone that would scrape the extra stuff out of the big vat, and they made ashtrays and different things that they sold. And they have some of the, it's probably one of the best small museums around.
You know how come I know so much about Copper Hill? Because we drove through there a lot, going to North Carolina for my dad to buy cigarettes.
Because they were cheaper.
They were cheaper.
Oh, I mean,
across the
you'd
line,
see
yeah.
everybody in Bradley County up there, and they weren't just packing, like a carton or two. They'd a whole trunkload of
You can
cigarettes.
make it worth your while.
And then, like, we got to drive real close, real slow back, because, we could get pulled over and be arrested. And I'm sitting in the back seat, scared to death that I'm going to jail because I'm getting no cigarettes.
8 years old. Going to jail.
But-
Also, I wanted to mention that the state has come in and started looking at the downtown area and trying to put together a business district, historic business district. So if you happen to be listening and you have old pictures of some of the downtown buildings, they're needing to see like what the roof lines look like and how much the buildings have been changed. And I've helped with that as much as I can. And we need a few more pictures, especially of the right around the courthouse square.
How old do they need those? I've got the picture. I've got a real great old picture. Apparently, one of the first airplanes that ever come over Cleveland. They took a picture.
1920s.
Took a picture of it, and you can see the old courthouse. But you looking north, you could see at the corner of Central and Ocoee, there was a big, huge
That was
house,
a Hardwick
right there,
house.
which was a Hardwick
Right.
house.
That was George L. Hardwick Sr.'s house, but it was originally built by one of the Cragmiles. But the Cragmiles never lived in it. I think
All right, Rufus.
he passed away.
Never
You
got
need
phone
to
call.
start. I know, but Rufus needs to start writing some of this stuff down.
Go ahead, call you live.
Hey, Ron.
Hey.
I heard Bob Cashel in there saying he wanted me to clean his house.
Yes.
Tell him I'll go clean it, but he can't be there. And when I get done, if he don't pay me, I'll take half his furniture.
Well, let me make a better deal. He won't be there, and he pays you in advance.
Well, that'd be all right, too.
Okay, well, I'll pass that on to you.
All right.
All right, bye-bye, Red.
All righty. Bye-bye.
You guys got any final thing here? It's time for us to go.
Amy
I
and
just
I
want to
are-
say thank you. We've been having a lot of fun.
Tell us the web address again for the historic district.
Okay. Historic, all right, remember, we're Historic Cleveland Neighborhood Association. The historic district sits within our boundaries. Our website is www.historiccleveland.org. For $20, you can be a member of our neighborhood
great.
association. We would love to have you. We have a great time.
I don't have to own a home there, do I?
Well, you don't. You can pay if you want to just come to our porch parties.
Heard that,
we do
Deb.
have
We
porch
don't have to
parties.
own a home up there.
Now, I'm pretty sure it helped to own a home. It would
Okay.
make it all the more fun. But anyway, it's a great opportunity. $20 to be a member. Please come and join us.
Let's get this one last call. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Lisa Poe Jones again. Mitchell Kinder probably has all of the photos of all the old businesses downtown that anyone could ever be interested in looking at.
He posted a picture the other day of the inside of an auto parts place on McCoy Street from the beginning of autos, and it was pretty interesting. I'll check with Mitch. Thank you.
Yes, he does. And I have a request for some photos myself. If anybody has photos of the Methodist District Superintendent's parsonage that was built in Bowman Hills in 1965, I would love to have copies of those.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
But we pulled out a picture of that old Hardwick house that we were just talking
Never
about, and
seen
it is
this.
absolutely
Isn't that-
fabulous.
That is fabulous.
And I believe it burned. Did it
So
burn?
say, how did
Rufus?
it come?
burned.
It burned.
And then most people remember that's where Penny's and
Yeah.
Woolworths.
And all that was.
What
Well,
a
Amy,
beautiful
thank you
spot.
so much for being with us today.
Thank you for
and
having me.
when you guys, if you think of another show that we need to do, always let us know. We're always looking for new ideas. I think it's been
Ruth, you
fun.
got any final comments?
Oh, it's just been great to be here. Look forward to coming back again.
Well, we hope you do. And talking about auto parts and old stores, Foster's Auto Parts over on Wildwood, a
Closed
long
its
time
door.
place for auto repairs, has now closed. All the family's pretty much well gone now, so that's gone. So we always tell everybody every week that it's your job to save history in this community, and you can do that by a few simple things. You can take a small video recorder, sit down with your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles.
Or yourself.
And yourself now, too. And just record what you remember or what they remember. I know recently my 89-year-old uncle, the last one left on my mother's side of the family, we went and took our cameras and recorded him for 2 hours sitting talking. We'd asked him questions, and a great way, he talked about things I'd never heard. So we've done that. Find the pictures, get them out of those shoe boxes and out of the drawers, and get you some little white labels and get someone in the family to tell you who's in the picture. We get a lot of great historical pictures given to us, have no idea who they are. They'll have a little information on there. So start doing that. It's very, very important. It's our job. Every day that someone passes away in this community, we lose history. So it's up to us to do that. That's part of the reason we do this show every week. And what we always say is, we'll always remember Pearl Harbor, but
will we remember Aunt Pearl? See you guys next week on Old Town Cleveland.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Where the old town goes. They moved it on over here in a shopping mall. Just me.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. Need a little extra cash right away? Who doesn't? Turn your car into cash at Check into Cash.
Get up to $4,000 with your car title only from